So today we are joined by Helen Sharron Pollard. She is a blockchain innovator piloting on the Ethereum Polygon blockchain. She's a co-founder and CTO of Selfiant. She launched a groundbreaking smart contract tool on Ethereum mainnet in 2024. With over 2 decades in financial tech firms like State Street, Putnam, and BNY Mellon, Helen is on a mission to empower women in Web3, bridging financial literacy gaps and driving for a more inclusive digital economy. Really, really excited to have you here today, Helen, and excited to dive into your journey and vision for the future in Web3.
Thank you very much, Jeanette. I'm excited to be here as well, talking to another woman in the blockchain world.
So just to start out, do you mind giving us a little bit of an insight into your journey in Web3?
Sure, I'd love to, and thank you for that. I would say that the moment that everything changed for me, and I knew that I had to pursue a cause of action, was when I was on site in Seattle at Amazon in 2010. And I was creating a beachhead for a company that I had co-founded, a company called Talent Fusion, and I was recruiting for them their key hires. And at the time, their key hires were Lean, Six Sigma, blockchain engineers, mostly coming out of MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. I figured there was something there that I needed to get in front of. So I put a placeholder in my mind to do a deeper dive. But I came away from that experience understanding that blockchain can transform a supply chain in any industry, and that was a valuable learning. I went back to financial services soon after we sold that company, and I was afforded some really tremendous, amazing opportunities there. But blockchain and crypto technologies kept crossing my mind. So while I was at Bank of New York Mellon, I did take a class of blockchain and cryptocurrencies, ironically at the MIT, and I started to incubate my blockchain company, Selfient, through my project dissertation. So my partner and I are serial entrepreneurs, and he and I waded through the Web3 landscape, looking initially to build a gig economy that would offer a more just and fair hiring process. But we had a team of analysts, and this was before I officially joined the company full time. And they got really enamored with the Bored Ape Yacht Club and the NFTs, and they went down that pathway. And that was going a little bit crazy. And it was a bit of a distraction to the team, but it was a good lesson that we needed to pivot out of. But as an early adopter of blockchain technologies, you learn that the landscape is changing quickly, and it was hard to get a toehold, hard to get an understanding of where we needed to go. But we adapted and we found our niche, and we built what is a smart contract generation tool that could support way more than just a hiring process. But one thing that was clear to me from my classes and from my work with the senior most stakeholders at BNY Mellon is that everything that we know about money is built for a world that doesn't include me. And once you understand that, you start to see that everywhere, right? Even as recent as 1974 in the United States, a woman couldn't hold a credit card in her own name. She needed to have a male cosigner. But today, there's still a billion women worldwide that don't have access to financial institutions formally. So it's hard to face it, but you realize this isn't just an accident, it's by design. So a month after I finished that course at MIT, I did something that sort of made sense to me and probably made no sense to the world at all. They were saying to me, what about these bored apes? It sounds like a fad to me. In January of 2023, I walked away from institutional power and I went on the road to build something for myself, which was this Web3 company called Selfiant.
And so I love that, and I also love the as you describe that journey, that kind of pivot point, at that aha moment of realizing there's a big problem here, and obviously the courage on your end to take the leap to look to solve that. So how does Selfie aim to solve for that problem?
So, again, I just want to underscore that for me, the whole jump and the whole leap was to empower women. And so we built this foundational platform, which is a trust layer, and we determined that we wanted to build it on Polygon, Ethereum. And we figured that what we could do is build something that was foundational to every transaction that was done on Web3. And then what we understood is what made it hard to build on Web3 or to transact business on Web3 was the notion of the smart contract, right? Which you can move money in Web3 from a crypto wallet to crypto wallet, but if you're going to put any parameters around it, you have to build a smart contract. And that in itself becomes a blocker because it requires really specialization of development skills. And the average to build a smart contract is about $40,000. So we figured, okay, well, we could build this tool where people could go onto our site and use our agent to build their own contract, and they connect their wallet and they figure out what the terms of the contract are and they agree to it, and it gets written onto the Ethereum blockchain, and it's immutable and it can't be changed. So that's kind of exciting. So if I were going to hire somebody to build a website for me, I could probably do it myself for a couple $100, or you could spend tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars depending on how robust you're going to make it. But I could hire somebody who was in the countries across the world to do that. I would create the contract. They would agree to the terms. My money would go into escrow. That escrow money would be written onto the chain. The person would create the web development for me. It would come in, I'd see it, the money would get released, and it's safe, it's trustless, money moves automatically, and that's what we decided to do. So as I said, it sits at the heart of every crypto transaction that's done in Ethereum. We have a roadmap that would take us to other alt chains as well. But Selfient takes care of the biggest blocker for adoption, which is to create the smart contract without the coding and the cost.
And so you've obviously had quite a journey personally in stepping away, I think you said, from kind of institutional power into this journey as an entrepreneur. What have been some of your learns along the way as a Web3 founder?
Well, it's a difficult space to get into for sure. I think that it's probably easier for somebody who comes out of college with a foundational background and the technologies. But when you've been out in the world for a long time, that making that transition can be very difficult because finding the toehold, as I said before, it was a little bit hard. But it's also a bit of a Wild West, and companies come and go. We were partnering with companies earlier on to learn more about the space, and some of the companies that we were talking to 2 years ago are no longer out there. So that's been kind of an interesting thing to see how the rapid decline and fall. It's difficult to get attention for companies to get attention from VCs and what have you. So you have a bit of work to do there. When I said that it's a bit of a Wild West, some of the institutional knowledge that I have and the governance structures that I've been used to and I've built up over 20 years of financial services technology aren't really resonant in Web3. And so things are a little bit harder because the understanding of language and how things get done aren't institutionalized. And so governance structure really needs to be brought into this realm. And I'm kind of excited to say that, I'm a bit of an expert here, and I think I can lend some of that expertise to the build and the adoption of Web3.
Yeah. So if you were to look at other people taking these same steps into, maybe founding their own company, what advice would you give to first-time founders? And
particularly women, I think you have to take a look at what your resources are at the time that you're going in and evaluate your own project management skills and determine whether or not you have the ability to do something yourself, to write your own code and to build your own teams, or if you need to go out and get a lab company to do some of the build for you once you've got your financial backing. And those lab companies, I think, are probably really good and they'll get better, but they're still could use, some years of refinement and understanding before they're really as impactful and helpful as potentially needs be.
Okay. So pivot in a little bit then. When you look at some of the kind of emerging trends that are happening in the space, what are some of the things that excite you the most?
Well, I think what's really the most exciting about it is the opportunities here to bring in women into this emerging technology space. And I'm not seeing a lot of that being done. We say that it's a lot of people coming out of VCs and coming out of recent college experiences, and they're working on something kind of with the blinders on in a vacuum. So, someone like me and some of the other guests that you've had on the podcast that have maybe been in the game for a little bit, I think is very helpful to get the mass adoption for women. And if I could tie it back to some of the things that are happening around the world, we talked a little bit on this call about how difficult it can be for women to have access to money. And we've seen in the world in 2023, for instance, Afghanistan removed banking privileges for women. So if a woman had a smart wallet, they had access to money. If they didn't, they lost all ability to fend for themselves. And we've seen things happen in 2020 in Nigeria that the women that were protesting police brutality also lost their ability to do banking. And that took a while to resolve. And when women are losing power in the United States and Europe, and we're seeing with our new government how those power structures could be really very impactful to us. So I think it's really important to start getting women engaged here and saying, well, you can store water and beans in your basement, but you ought to get a crypto wallet as well. And if you have a crypto wallet, you've got access to what's the next level after access, because access without autonomy isn't quite enough. And again, that's something where a company like Selfient can help women move forward. So where I see, my journey here is trying to help women to adopt something that's really very timely in our lives. And the world is showing us that we need to wake up to some of what the possibilities really are for the denial of banking access.
So it's interesting the way that you frame that. Obviously, one of the gaps between adoption is oftentimes education, right? So it's all very well to have these kind of incredible solutions, but people can't access them if they're not educated on it. So, what are your thoughts around awareness, education, and what resources would you point people to in those instances?
Well, so it's a really great question, right? So how you bring women more and more into it, and I think podcasts like this, opportunities for women, embracing the circle, starts to become really important. And I, you know, access to power for women has been a problem for millennia. It's not just today. And how did we do it before? And how are we getting out of it? So the internet and Web3 are wonderful as break down the barriers, but it is really women who are in positions of leadership embracing each other and helping each other to get out of things. So I could talk a little bit about how difficult it is, from a VC perspective, how difficult it is for women to get money to, or follow some of the paths that could potentially be open to them if VC money were given to them. For instance, 2.1% of VC money across sectors goes to women. And blockchain, it's even worse. It's about 1.5% of money of the 28 billion spent last year went to women endeavors. And for women of color, it's even less than 1%. And so it is in getting your women's groups thinking about it, helping to, on Facebook, I have friends who are talking about how difficult things are. And I'm like, well, get a crypto wallet. And I got a question like, what's a crypto wallet?
Yeah.
So it's engaging in social media and going further and further from that inner circle, and showing women how important this access could be. So, for instance, in countries in Latin America, women have difficulty owning properties, but they can tokenize their
Mm.
property. And once they've tokenized something, and yes, that is a bit of a journey, but there are people like me, and there's things on YouTube that can show you how to do it. And AI is certainly an equalizer that can show women how to tokenize their property. But once that's done, women start to own inheritable wealth.
Mm.
And local laws can't take something that's been tokenized and written on the web away from somebody. And so women can now inherit property as opposed to losing it once they become a widow, or losing it just by inheritance rights in their world today.
Yeah, so you brought up a lot of really key points there. Just even picking up on the first point around the funding gap, that it feels like that particular data point has gone backwards instead of forwards, actually. So it's like it feels even tighter in terms of the percentage of funds that are going to women-owned businesses. There's a ton of bias that's built into the process, whether people want to acknowledge that or not. From your experience, what are some of the things that collectively the industry needs to do to make this a more level playing field?
There's 11% of decision makers in VC firms are women, and VC firms led by women are 2 times more likely to invest in women's startups, but they can't possibly shrink the gap that we're seeing. And it's worse in Web3 than it is in traditional Web 2.0
Mm.
firms, right? So, we're talking about the democratization of money, and how important that is, and yet we're seeing a larger and larger gap due to technology and other reasons. And some of the questions are, why is that happening? And I think awareness becomes important, like pattern matching. So VCs tend to invest in companies that have succeeded before. And that makes sense, but that's usually men. So strike,
Mhm.
that makes it harder for women. There's a risk perception out there that women are seen as riskier investments, despite research that shows that women's startups are somewhere in the neighborhood of 63% more stable and more apt to make a return than men. So these are perceptions, and then there's the network bias, where 80% of, or maybe it's even higher, but 80% of VC deals are done with warm introductions. So if you're a woman or you're a woman of color, where are those people in your network? So
Mm.
trying to find that out is really important. And then there's the unconscious bias that men are just going to be better at pitching. And even if a woman or a man presented this exact same pitch, 70% of men were going to get the funding versus women, and that's a tough one. And then regulatory inaction. With DEI absolutely collapsing in the U.S., there's no incentive for regulatory measures to address gender inequality in VC funding. There's very few role models. There's very few women out there in Web3 space. 5% of the CEOs in Web3 are women. 4% of the CTOs are women in that space. So it taps into something that's deeply revealing, like the meritocracy that we've talked about is actually in reverse. The meritocracy means men tend to do better. So, as you say, how do we change that lens? So we need to seek out women. We need to support them. We need to listen to them. We need to engage. We need to get more women to get crypto wallets. We need to use products and services where women are founders and help them out. We need to go the extra mile to help women get roles in Web3. Invite them, look for evidence-based investing and gender lens investing, and the networks and the communities where founders can connect with each other and with other entrepreneurs. So they're starting. LinkedIn has a number of groups that have women investors and women in Web3. There's more of them, more and more of them. I know you know quite a few of them yourself in your
Yeah.
network, Jeanette, but we have to do better. Our
Yeah.
leadership really has to matter. I
Mm.
think this is a good bet. How do we bring that forward?
This incredible collaborative and community spirit amongst the women in Web3, right? So
Hmm.
I don't think for most people, the reasons that they got into this space and the change that they're looking to see, no one wants this to be another replica of, what big tech looks like, and the sort of web 2.0 world. Currently it is looking like that. When you sort of see how things are shaking out, you see the balance of power and those sorts of things. But I do think you've got this deeply committed community of women that are advocating for not just for change, but giving one another a helping hand along the way, which is really encouraging to see. But I
Hmm.
think a lot of what you've just described, it really means that allyship and action from the broader community in the broader space, starting with the trail of money, who is funded and who is doing the funding, has a very, very outsized impact on how this is ultimately going to look.
You're absolutely right. And it really matters. If we can't break this open and make it more equitable at the very start of this journey, how are we ever going to do it further down the road?
Yeah.
Those biases are just going to get baked in, and we're going to rebuild a system that we're trying desperately to get out of.
Yeah.
So, it's really on us to have an awareness of that. Mm.
Yeah. I agree. Well, I wanted to just actually dive into something that you touched on earlier on, which was your sort of relationship to talent, which I think is kind of
Mm.
quite unique because you've shared your journey a little bit with me before around building this talent and tech forward business. What's your take on the current status of talent coming into the Web3 space, and what do you think needs to happen to move that further along?
Well, I was really hopeful that the regulatory bodies, for instance, in the United States, and I'm not really sure what's going on in Europe, I was really hoping that there'd be a thought that this is a really important place to start, and that we need to bring more women into the space, and that we would encourage founders that are in next stage rounds where they're building out their teams would start to look a little bit more deeply and their org charts and start bringing in more women. But I'm not sure that that's going to be enough. And so advocacy here is really going to be very important. And I think that there's so many people have lost their jobs with some of the government firings that have occurred in the last 30 days, as well as the giant tech layoffs of a whole layer of middle managers. I think there's an opportunity for a reversal of trends, if you will, where the middle management layers that know how infrastructures and institutions run and know how to run them really well could start to take up the reins and come into this Web3 platform and the AI platform and take over and turn them into something that's a little bit more empowered. And when I talk about that, I saw a lot of companies letting that layer go, and a lot of them were women.
Mm,
And there's no stats on that, which is really disappointing. I think we're horrible stat keepers. So, like, I love to see some more of that founded and talked about, so that we understood, well, who's out there
mm.
and what's available. So there's some real institutional work that needs to happen, and I'm not quite sure, Jeanette, where that lands. Like, who is looking at that landscape and really trying to change things. But I'd love to think that that a group of powerful women, a small group of powerful women, could change that world, because, like, according to Margaret Mead, it's really the only thing that ever has.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I honestly think even if you take this outside of gender, there will come a point where there needs to be a more wholesale plan to
Mm-hmm.
onboard
Mm-hmm.
Web 2 talent into Web 3 because the pace of innovation and growth
organizations will not be able to just continue to sort of expand with Web3 talent, right? Because there's a finite number of people who have these skills. And I already am seeing a little bit of a talent crunch for, certain skill sets. And I think there will need to be a much more wholesale approach to developing talent that can come in and contribute in a meaningful way to the community, and to make this a little bit more of an inclusive experience for those people that are bridging and making the gap. Because in some ways, like, there's a bit of a barrier to entry into Web3, where everything that people are saying kind of sounds like double dutch, and people don't have a very good way and a simplifying that for people that are coming into the industry.
I think it's very difficult, to understand and get that toehold. So I think it's important for for people like me too to have that open door and talk to people about it. And I'd love to see all the founders and C-level people in the Web3 world put a little bit of their time aside to teaching, exploring, showing things, allowing their companies to do more podcasts and videos and so on that help explain, how you can get through things. And now we're all trying to learn how to embrace AI into this as well. But just a whole nother aspect of this, and why the Web3 can actually be powerful too, is because even in Web3, not every last thing is a bit of Solidity code or Rust code. A lot of it is still Python and MongoDB and Postgres databases and so on. So that's at least familiar to the technology world. And most of everything that's built in Web 2.0 is going to need to be built more efficiently in Web 3 without the redundancies of having to check your work. So, things can be built more quickly. But one of the reasons why, I had jumped into this, and I talked about the recruiting side of things and the hiring equity and so on, because Web3 allows for transparency. A wallet has no gender, which is just a really lovely thing. So if you're somebody who can do a PowerPoint document, you can be hired just for your ability, not based on whether you're a man or you're a woman. So that bias I talked about a little bit before, where people prefer men to do the work somehow, 70% of the time, there's that hidden behind the screen of your wallet that maybe allows for more readable adoption of women and their capabilities.
And on sort of predictions for the next 12 months, where do you see the space going?
Well, what I think is happening is most blockchain founders are incorporating AI into the work and have already, which is great. I think a lot of Web 2 companies put a lot of their projections into how AI would free up workers. So I think we're going to see a lot of workers come off the sidelines, and they're going to need to make a decision about, are they going to go back into the old power structures, or are they going to throw their hat in the ring into the brave new world? So I love to see that whole brave new world come into play. I think the gatekeepers are the VCs in many ways. So my prediction, my hope, my fervent hope is that more VCs will start funding Web3 projects and allow those disenfranchised Web 2 workers to come in and really build this out, because that's where this is going to change the ballgame. So definitely to evangelize women in Web3 is really important to me. So this is the beginning of that road there. I've started to write some editorials for a couple of Web3 devoted mediums, and I try to get the word out there. So go to more conferences and speak. I've been invited to talk at the Boston Blockchain Conference, so I'm pretty excited about there. So there I am as an evangelist, but I'm also hopeful myself that I can get more VC funding in order to build out my application, and as well work with partnerships that want to get more, transform their game from the traditional world into Web3, because we can facilitate and spearhead that. So I have a pretty robust roadmap that we're looking to pursue. And I'm always helpful. I'm ever the optimist, but it's never really steered me wrong. And if it were my prediction, we're going to come out ahead this year, and we're going to see quite a lot of interest in this space.
It's super exciting what you're doing because it's so purpose driven and so linked in many ways to the whole foundation of and the idea and the premise around blockchain. So I'm excited to see and to follow your project and to see all the ways that you're able to create this incredible benefit to women who truly need the financial inclusion. So thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for giving us your insights, and thanks for being visible and vulnerable in terms of sharing your learns as a founder and a CTO. I'm sure that will inspire many people who are looking to make similar steps. Tell our audience how they can find you. What's the best way to keep up with you and maybe even to contact you?
So yeah, please go out and look at my website at selfiant.com or XYZ or AI. So Selfiant, Selfient, like take a selfie and see what your future is going to be. Also, you can find me on LinkedIn. That's very easy. Helen, Sharron, Pollard, as you said. I'm out there. Listen, I am so happy to meet up with people and to talk to people and to get onto some of the groups that I'm on so that we can bridge together and shorten this gap so that we can all move this forward. $5 trillion is left on the table every year in GDP by not having women and more involved in the workplace. So let's get women here and open the pie up for everybody.
Yeah, I love that. Get the pie bigger. Thank you so much for joining us, Helen, and to our audience. We will catch you next time on Blockchain Disruptors.
Thank you, Janelle.